Well, good morning to everybody. Want to mention too, of course, the Howertons we have. Glad to have them with all of our bunch, always the case. We've been on quite the journey together, 200 years. 200 years from approximately 930, some would say 931 BC, at the division of the kingdom when Solomon passes away and his son Rehoboam takes over. And we've gone all the way from 931 to right about 731 is where we find ourselves today, and I'm a little bit saddened to report this is the beginning of the end for the northern portion of God's people. So we're in 2 Kings chapter 17. Good morning, Jimmy. 2 Kings 17 is where we're picking up, starting, of course, in the first verse in that location. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah. Has Ahaz been a good or a bad king? Judah, so sometimes we have good and bad there. Not so good. His name sounds like, it works, doesn't it? You know, the name association. Sounds like Ahab. Ahab was a terrible king in Israel. Ahaz, unfortunately, was a bad king also, but in the south. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, Hoshea, the son of Elah, became king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned for 9 years. For those keeping track, here's our time frame here. I told you we've gone about 200 years. Division of the kingdom at the death of Solomon takes place approximately what year? 900, you said? Okay. So yeah, about 900. So, we'll have to talk about this because I know we had the dates some before. But about 930 you'll find BC, maybe more exactly 931 BC. I mentioned we're 200 years later. So Hoshea, his reign, the son of Elah, over Israel and Samaria is for 9 years, and that's from 732 to 723 BC. 732 to 723 BC. Look at all the progress we've made. Unfortunately, he's a king of Israel, so it means he's what? 100% bad. They're always bad. The kings of Israel. That's right. I wish that were wrong, but it's not. That's the case. Verse 2, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. But credit him. So it's kind of like Jehu. Not as the kings of Israel who were before him. Jehu's a king of Israel. He's a bad king too, but there's some slight positives that you can find with a number of these guys, even in Israel. And that's the case with Hoshea. Verse 3, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, remember that's not Syria, but that's Assyria, came up against him. So I'm going to take just a moment and show this map. I haven't really shown a lot of maps from a broader scale, and I want to do this. We've been going up here to the up and right of our screens. Congratulations. This is a real privilege. This is a late Christmas present for everybody. You don't have to thank me. I'm putting it on the screen today so we can actually see it. And in the purple there, you have the Assyrian Empire. Now notice there's Judah in brown, and then the whatever-ish, greenish yellow, that you have for Israel. And then directly to the north of Israel is Syria, and we've seen that on the map many times with the capital city of Damascus. But you can tell by this map, we've been dealing well up to the northeast with the Assyrian empires. That's in the land called Mesopotamia. Anybody remember what Mesopotamia means? The land between the rivers. Yeah. I actually had to freshen up on it a little bit. I'd gotten stuck in my mind, the land beyond the river. No, okay, yes, I'm glad you bring that up because I'm going to come back to you, Justin, in just a little bit. No, actually, we're going to do it right now. So I know you've spent some time in that area of the world, and we understand from what we've been told, videos, pictures, all that kind of stuff. You know from firsthand experience what it's like in that area. Tons of desert. Desert here, desert all over the place. So are there any nice spots in the land? You've been between the rivers, right? The Euphrates and the Tigris? Well, I mean, that's relatively. I'm not talking like culture, okay?
Right.
Okay. Geography. Is it nice at all? It's a rocky desert, for those who might not have heard. Everything in that area is a rocky desert. Right. Yeah, pumping in a lot of water wherever you have greenery, right? And there's not a whole lot of it sounds like. All right, well, relatively speaking, this entire area is called, and probably back in the day it was much more that way naturally. But this entire area, kind of the greenery that you see, is called the Fertile Crescent. Now, again, that's relatively speaking, right? And it does seem that it was probably much more fertile back in the day than what it is today, and even the land of Israel. But this area right here, the land between the rivers, who came from that area, by the way? Really close to Babylon. Very important person. May or may not be the father of our faith, as in he absolutely is. Very good. Abraham, yeah, so that's Ur of the Chaldees, and that's down around this area of Babylon. Of course, he ends up migrating over in this direction, and really just all over throughout his life. Anyway, so I bring all that up to say this. In the land of Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, there is at least some greenery and spots to be found, because there is water there. And because there's water, there's animals, and because there's animals, there's and that helps to create through fertilizer, right? Yeah, very good. All right, so that's the area with which we've been dealing. I know we don't have any scale right here, but I'm going to show you with this next map. The next map gives a scale, and through that legend key, you can tell that, okay, that's 300 miles, and you measure that out from the Assyrian Empire over to Israel, that's farther than what it looks on the map. You're looking at about a good 1,000 miles in travel. And that means if you go from the Assyrian Empire to Israel, from Israel to the Assyrian Empire, you've gone beyond your earliest beach access from the Ozarks down south. All right, that's about 750 miles, give or take. And so, I mean, that's a long trip back in the day. That's a long trip today. That's a really long trip back then. All right, so I hope that helps in our discussions here. Verse 3 of 2 Kings 17. Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against them, and Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute money. That's a nice way of saying, please don't kill me. Here, take everything we have, and we'll keep giving you everything we have. Just don't kill us. And so that's the arrangement that these two have in place. That occurs about 727 BC. And if you recall the dates for the 90 years that Hoshea reigns as king of Israel and Samaria, it's 732 to 723 BC. So 727, when this event takes place and he says, please don't kill us, take all of our money, and we'll continue to give you all of our money, that's about the middle of his reign. Again, 727 BC. Verse 4, and the king of Assyria uncovered a conspiracy. Oh, there's that ugly word again. If only those things weren't true. If only they never happened. But the Bible says those happen time and time and time again, especially when you're dealing with government. The king of Assyria uncovered a conspiracy by Hoshea. And remember, that's the king of Israel. For he had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt. I don't know anything about So, but I appreciate So. We have all of these wild names. Tiglath-Pileser III, Shalmaneser, Hoshea. What's your name? So. I like you. I like the king of Egypt. He had sent messengers to So, king of Egypt, and brought no tribute to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. When we read the next sentence, but how do you think Mr. King of Assyria, Shalmaneser, feels about that? All right, we can't wait to get our $78 million from Hoshea. Has anybody seen the check lately? No? I'm sure it'll be coming in next week. Oh, it's not coming, huh? Oh, he's very upset, the king of Assyria. Therefore, the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Verse 5, now the king of Assyria went throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it for 3 years. Okay, so we're looking at in our beautiful colors here. The Fertile Crescent in green, the Assyrian Empire in purple, and to go all the way from there to the Puke Yellow in Israel and in Samaria, about how many miles again? 1,000 miles. So you go down to the panhandle of Florida, you traveled about 750 miles. That's a long trip. Not very happy by the end of that, right? Especially if you're taking a crew along with you. But you go an extra 250 miles. I mean, you're looking probably down at the middle of Florida. You travel all that way. You're really not happy. And that's with great roads and nice, comfortable vehicles. You have terrible roads and very bumpy rides, uncomfortable vehicles, no temperature control within, and it's all a bunch of nasty men who are making that trip together. How do you think you feel after 1,000 miles? Listen, you don't make that trip unless you're dead serious about something. Exactly, right, Roy? Probably a couple of months. And that's with military personnel that can travel very efficiently and very quickly compared to normal people like you and I. Could be. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. So, yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. As you're going through different lands, and people might not want you to come into their lands, especially with an army, right? So, and either you have to fight as you go through, or, hopefully you have an alliance or just an understanding. If that doesn't work, like the Israelites, maybe at times you have to go around and add a whole bunch more, hundreds of miles to your journey. Good point, Roy. Thank you for that. The king of Assyria went throughout all the land and went up to Samaria, that's an elevation, and besieged it for 3 years. The guy ain't playing around. Verse number 6, in the 9th year of Hoshea. How long did Hoshea reign as king of Israel? 9. In the 9th year, bye-bye. This is it for him. He's essentially probably signed his death warrant. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away to Assyria. How far? Not a little bit away. 1,000 miles away. For us, it would be similar to carrying us into Canada. I mean, this is a long trip that's being made. And he placed them in Halah by the Habor, the river of Gozan, and the cities of the Medes. All right, so let's look at our map and see if we can figure this out. The Israelites are taken from the city of Samaria. You can see that at the start of the line. Or I should say, it's not straight enough, but the ray, a little bit more so. We have an end point, and we have an arrow on the other side. But we have Samaria over on the left middle portion of the screen, and they are carried away from there to Halah. And are you able to see that? That's going to be, I can get my laser going for our visitors. We can't go down on the screen and read it, but just right below, right there, is Halah, as well as Habor, and we don't have that one on the map. However, we are told this, the river of Gozan, and you see the city of Gozan. And we go back to the previous map. I like these two together. I know this one doesn't have a lot of detail on it, but you see that stream that comes, looks like it's flowing from north to south into the Great River, the tributary of the Euphrates. Now, if you'll kind of interpose those in your mind, all right, you have this crook where it empties in straight up here into the Euphrates River, and you go up from that crook and then a little bit to the west, and we'll look at that second map again. And whenever you do that, that's going to be right in the area of Gozan. So it appears that probably the stream begins at Gozan, which is likely why it's called the river of Gozan that empties into the Euphrates. So the Israelites are carried far away, about 1,000 miles into Mesopotamia. And isn't that kind of interesting? Their history begins where? In the land between the rivers. And then we fast forward from Abraham, about give or take 2000 BC, to where we are getting close to 700 BC. 1,300 years later, God's called them out of this place and to go to the new land and to be this great people, and they are, and they become that. And more than a millennium later, where are they? Right back where they started, because they wouldn't listen to God, as is going to be reiterated to us here in just a moment. Also, they're placed in the cities of the Medes. I know we're not there yet, but down the road, there's an empire that's going to arise. This is 2 world dominations down the road. You have the Assyrians, and next, who comes after the Assyrians in history? The Babylonians. And then comes whom? The Persians, and sometimes, now from history, we hear more of the Persians. From the Bible, you'll hear not just Persians, but as well the Medo-Persian. That's a hyphen. Medo-Persian. 2 elements of it, which is foretold in Daniel's vision under the time period of the Babylonians, Daniel chapter 2. With the Medo-Persian Empire. And so these Medans, kind of like the Assyrians, before you read about them and you start reading more and more about the Assyrians, then it's the Assyrians are in domination. Here we have the little snippet. In the cities of the Medes. Later you'll read in history the city and the Republic of Rome. You start reading a little bit more about it, and then it's the Roman Empire. So God's working through these cities of the Medes. He's going to bring it up into the next world empire, not immediately after Assyria, but immediately after Babylon. So it's two empires down the road. Before we move on, I want to read this comment to you that comes from James Smith commentary from verse 6 of 2 Kings 17. He mentions that the ruler here could still be Shalmaneser, or it's possible that it could be a guy by the name of Sargon, because both reign in 722 BC, which is believed when this happens. So it could be on Shalmaneser's watch, or it could be that the hands of power have already shifted and it's Sargon in 722 who's in place. And that, by the way, is the end. Officially, historically, biblically, everything, that is the end of the Israelite kingdom. 722 BC. They've been defeated, they're gone, they're carried away. So here's the comment from James Smith commentary. He says, Assyrian records relate that 27,290 persons were carried captive from Samaria, and doubtless many others from smaller villages round about. This is the great carrying away, the defeating, and then the absorption by the Assyrian Empire. Verse number 7. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned. This is the reason. All right, so if someone by chance were to pick up a copy of the Bible and just start reading here, and you have God and his people and he loves them so much, and then you read, this is the end of God's people, the beginning of the end, they're defeated, they're all carried away. And, well, wait a minute, I thought there was this caring God who really loved his people. Well, just in case we just started reading right here, here's the big, long defense that's made. And it kind of reminds me of the Declaration of Independence of the United States. If you ever wonder, what took place between America and Great Britain, why it ever came to the point that it did, just in case, there's the big, long list of reasonings that the founders lay out. Well, that's the case here. There's this big, long defense that's provided by God. For so it was that the children of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of the land of Egypt. They were nobody. Remember God saying, look, I didn't choose you because you were the greatest of all peoples. And in fact, you were the least. If I wanted anyone impressive, I would have picked anyone other than you. But I chose you. By my hand, I brought you out of oppression. God was so good to them in the beginning, even though they didn't deserve it. From under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and not just from anywhere, but the most powerful nation in existence at the time. By the way, you could make a case about our country's history and the oppression that was being felt from the British crown, arguably the most powerful military in the world at that time. Interesting, all the parallels. We've done that many times with our own country. Verse 8, and had walked in the statutes of the nations whom the Lord had cast out from before the children of Israel, and of the kings of Israel which they had made. Remember, God says, he makes a promise to Abraham, hey, when these days are complete, not right now, but in 400 years down the line, I'm going to bring your descendants into this land after a stay that they have in Egypt. But he says, I'm going to wait 400 years. Why? I can't just, he can, but in the character of God, I think you could make the case that it's not right for God just to kick people out of a place and put other people in that when it's their lands and their homes and their vineyards. Why does he wait 400 years, he says, when he makes the promise to Abraham? He says, for the sins of the Amorites, or Canaanites, those inhabitants of the land, are not yet full. In other words, I'm going to wait until it's right. It's just. Because of their sins, I'm going to punish them. And why did God punish the sins of the people of Canaan? What were their sins that were so grave? I mean, sinners are found everywhere in the world. Why does God eventually judge a nation in the sense of he completely strips the power and gives it over to someone else? Why does he do that to countries throughout history? Okay. A lot of it has to do with severe idolatry, right? You have Psalm 33:12, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. So first of all, if you have the right God in place as a nation, that's a plus, right? All right, what else? There you go. Which are often so intertwined with false religions. Immorality. And here's another one. You know this one. Proverbs 14:34. What exalts a nation? Okay, that's true. Proverbs 14:34. Righteousness exalts a nation. So it's just doing the right thing. Generally speaking, just morality. But it's strange, idolatry, immorality, fear of the Lord, morality. How those things are so tied in with one another. I mean it, check it out. In all other world religions, check out standards of right living in that religion, and you will find nothing like what you find in Christianity. Like what you find back in the day with Judaism, because God is God, and his righteous or moral standards have never changed. So what God does, he kicks out these nations because of their idolatry, and really I think it's more because of all the immorality that's associated. You find all kinds of fornication, homosexuality commonly in all these pseudo-religions around the world. I say all. There might be an exception or two among slivers of groups, okay? But you find it so intermingled. And one of the things God absolutely could not stand that went on in the land of Canaan in those false religions was the sacrifice of what? Of the innocent, of little kids, killing children. That's one thing God, one of the few, okay, in a nation that God will not tolerate. And so he kicks them out. He brings the Israelites in. Things are good for some time. The kingdom divides. It gets worse and worse. And what do the Israelites start to do in the divided kingdom? We found 931 BC from the very inception. The sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. What did he do? Idolatry, perversion, undoubtedly all kinds of sexual immorality that's going on in the name of religion. And as well, we found the sacrifice of the innocents. So what does God do? God is not a partial being. If his people are doing the same thing as those he's cast out before, he's going to do the same thing, even to his own people. That's what took place with Israel. Verse 9, also the children of Israel secretly did against the Lord their God things that were not right. And they built for themselves high places in all their cities. God had revealed, we know this by now, worship is to take place in one city. Which one? Jerusalem. In which place? Just one. The temple. Very good. And the temple, and there are altars that are specified for that. They quit doing that. In the north, they set up their own altars. This is an inconvenient religion. We shouldn't have to do this in Jerusalem. Let's put one in the north, one in the south. Whichever one you're closest to, you can go. Whatever you do, don't go down the south to Judah. And it's stated Jeroboam only sets this religion up because he's afraid he's going to lose his power and his money. A lot of times, that's the way government works, isn't it? It's operation on the basis of, I'm afraid if this, which is right, then I'm going to lose my influence and all this money is going to be gone. So we have to do things this way. And decisions are made on that basis and selfishly instead of with having the divine being in mind. All right, sorry, I had to flip a fly off my screen. We were on page 9, weren't we? Boy, those things are lethargic, the ones that are about to die. Okay, verse number 10. They set up for themselves sacred pillars and wooden images on every high hill and under every green tree. Had the discussion on the green trees. There they burn incense on all the high places like the nations, whom the Lord had carried away before them. And they did wicked things to provoke the Lord to anger, for they served idols, of which the Lord had said to them, you shall not do this thing. Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah. So it's not just the north, okay? It's also going on in the south more and more through the years. By all of his prophets, every seer, saying, turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes according to all the law, which I commanded your fathers and which I sent to you by my servants, the prophets. Mr. Marty? Right. Yeah, good. Yeah. Right? Right, yeah. And present tense, right? They did, or they continued doing. These aren't people like, oh man, I made a mistake one time. God's like, I'm done. I'm done with you. Listen, he's been dealing with this for 200 years. Good point you make, Marty. And what we just read in verse 13, he testified against Israel and Judah by all of his prophets, every one of them, every seer, saying, turn from your evil, get back to my... Why doesn't he just give them what they deserve? Because he's loving and he's forgiving. You know, as parents, we get pretty upset when we have a 2-day rough stretch with our kids. Are they ever going to... Now multiply the 2 days by half of 365 by 200, and then you get an idea with what God deals. Listen, the people who were so wicked before in the land of Canaan, they should have gotten what they deserved right then when God was speaking to Abraham. He says, you know, I'm going to give them another 400 years, though. We'll see how things go. And he knows how things are going to go. But that's God, isn't it? With Noah and the flood, not a single good thought went through the mind of any person save for the one family that was serving the Lord. And God said, that's it, I've had enough. I'm going to wipe them from the face of the earth in how long? 120 years. Back when there was no hope, even then. I mean, that's the patience and the love of God, isn't it? He's put up with this with his people who know better for a good couple hundred years, if not even really predating that. He sends every prophet he has to warn them. Get out of the wrong, get back to the right, and things can be good for you again. So what's their response in our memory work? 2 Kings 17:14. 2 Kings 17:14. Marty? Very good. Very, very good. They would not listen. For 200 years. It's sad, Sylvia, isn't it? Would not listen. Children would listen far better than these people. And the sad thing is they're just like the generation before them, and just like the generation before them, and just like the generation before them. They stiffen their necks. Remember the animal, you got to get it down to put the yoke on. You know, that big, strong ox neck, you can't move that. If the ox has his mind made up, wouldn't listen to God. And here's the real issue. I like how this is tied in. The problem in their disobedience is what? At the end of our memory verse. What's the real problem in disobedience? They didn't believe. Now, think about that. When Jesus says, Mark 16:16, you want to be saved? Unlike these people. You want to be saved? He who believes and obeys, right, is baptized, will be saved. But he who does not believe is condemned. And it's often pointed out, well, it's not mentioned there, the lack of obedience for being condemned. Well, there's a reason. That's a waste of breath. It's unnecessary. There's only one reason for disobedience. The one reason for disobedience in reality, I say one reason, 99 times out of 100, the one reason for disobedience is you really aren't convinced about what God has said. Because if we really believe what God said about those who refuse to obey him and the punishment that he has reserved, I am convinced every person in the world would obey him, without exception. But if we don't, we're really not convinced of what he's told us, just how bad the punishment would be. And you find that in Hebrews 3, it mentions they did not obey him, they did not obey him, they did, that kind of, and then you'll find they did not believe. And it's used almost in place of that if we really believe we're going to obey. And if we disobey, it's because we didn't believe. At least 99 times out of 100. It's true that they were rebellious and they did not obey, but it's because they really didn't believe in the promises that God was making. Verse 15, and they rejected his statutes and his covenant which he had made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he had testified against them. They followed idols, became idolaters, and went after the nations who were all around them, concerning whom the Lord had charged them that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of the Lord their God, made for themselves a molded image and 2 calves, reaching back in history, aren't they? Digressing. And you think about it, where did they learn this practice? The worship of these beautiful calves. Egypt? Yeah, right. They constructed in the wilderness, but they got that idea, Mount Sinai, from back in Egypt, right? So everything they're doing is reaching back to where they came. So again, I'd ask you to consider, they originally came from what place? Through the faith of their father? Over to the west of my laser beam. Ur of the Chaldees, right around the vicinity of Babylon. And so 1,300 years, they want to act like they were when they were slaves in Egypt, so God sends them all the way back to not Ur, but to Mesopotamia, the very place from where they came. So you want to start over? All right, let's rewind 1,300 years. This is where it began. And let's see if we can do better this time. Verse 16, they left all the commandments we have established, made the molded image, the 2 calves, made a wooden image, and served all the host of heaven. So they start worshiping the sun, the moon, the stars, the wandering stars, like people around them. And they served Baal. Now that's an addition. And they learned that from the Phoenicians, and who was the wonderful false prophetess who came down bringing the religion as a missionary into Israel. Jezebel, at the invitation of whom? God's own servant, the king of Israel, Ahab. Despicable. And if you think it can't get any worse, oh, it does. Verse 17, and they caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire. They gave their innocent children as sacrifices to gods that didn't even exist. What an exchange. I believe so. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Additionally, they practiced witchcraft and soothsaying, and they sold themselves to do evil in the sight of the Lord, Marty, to provoke him to anger. Are they just trying to make him mad? Well, they're acting like it, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay, so for those who aren't hearing, he's saying maybe in the haughtiness of their minds, they think they're like God, as good as God, whatever, and so, or they are God, replacing him, could be. Now, it might be that they're just ignoring, and it's just a consequence of their bad decisions that they're provoking him to anger. I'm glad you brought up what you had, because I hadn't considered that. It's very possible. In religion, just like in sports, there's a lot of rivalry that takes place. The showdown on Carmel, right? What do we call that? The clash on Carmel, or whatever, competition on Carmel. And you have Baal versus Yahweh. I mean, everyone's fired up for this, right? So it could be in their zeal for false gods and goddesses that they're actually, like the prophets of Baal, trying to duke it out with the Lord and to show him. I hadn't thought about that. So, that is a possibility. Whether it's intentional or not, they certainly did provoke him to anger. Verse 18, they succeeded, whether they were trying or not. Therefore, the Lord was very angry with Israel, and he removed them from his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah alone. Oh, well, at least he's got the good people still in the land. Oh yeah, verse 19. Also, Judah did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel, which they had made. So, and it makes a lot of sense. They have such close affiliations with Israel. God warns them now, do not, and they just keep. In fact, what do they start doing with the royalty of Judah? What do they start doing with the royalty of Israel? It's not just like they get together every now and then, powwows, or have alliances together. Oh, they have more than that. They have babies together. Yeah, they start taking one another in marriage. They're tight. They're doing Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter and everything they're doing together. And they're having these feasts and getting together, and they tell each other, they make vows, hey, your family is my family, your people are my people. They start calling each other by their names, and that's why you can't even, when you try, differentiate between the kings of Israel and Judah. A number of them have the same names. Two of them we found out at the same times, even, that they're reigning. Judah did just as, in fact, they walked in the statutes of Israel which they had made. And the Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel, afflicted them, delivered them into the hand of plunderers until he had cast them from his sight. For he tore Israel from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. Then Jeroboam drove Israel from following the Lord and made them commit a great sin, and every single king after walks in the sins we're told of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. You talk about precedence and the importance of setting the right example. For the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam which he did. They did not depart from them until the Lord had removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants the prophets. So Israel was carried away from their own land to Assyria, as it is to this day. Let's go ahead and get on to the next section and see if we can cover a chunk of this when Samaria gets repopulated. Verse 24. Then the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, and we'll go ahead and look at those on the map now as we go through. So you see Babylon, that's down in the southeastern portion of the land between the rivers. So if you go up from the laser, that's Babylon, long way away. Cutha, right beside it. So, I mean, you're looking at 800 miles if you're able to ford the river at that point. I don't know, it's pretty big by that spot. But if you're able to and go across, you'd have about 800 miles of travel just as the bird goes. So if you're having a zigzag some, you might be looking more 900, 1,000 miles away. Long way away. Ava. Wow. That's quite the distance, isn't it, from Ava all the way over to the Middle East. Now, a different one, right? Ava, that's just to the northeast a little bit of the territory of God's people. I say a little bit, it's still like 300 miles away. Hamath, that's in that general vicinity if you go down right there, upper left portion of the screen. And then also Sepharvaim, and that's close to that area. The king of Assyria brought people from all these places and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they took possession of Samaria, the capital city, formerly anyway, and dwelt in its cities. And so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there that they, these foreign peoples, did not fear the Lord, which makes a lot of sense. I don't even know who he is, I'm sure. They don't fear him. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. And it would work well after these places are defeated and they're kind of empty for a while. Animals are going to take notice, and they start creeping in, more and more, including, they're not there anymore, but lions used to be in this region of the world. You recall David killing a lion, and also bears. I don't think bears are there anymore, are they? Just in that area? Yeah. Bears or lions, but back when they used to be there. The Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So they spoke to the king of Assyria, saying, the nations whom you have removed and placed in the cities of Samaria, the problem is they do not know the rituals of the God of the land. I just want to pause right there for a minute. Isn't that an insult to the Lord? Rituals. When I read that almost, and I know there are a couple ways of looking at it, but I almost think like a jig and a dance, God likes it done this way. I mean, is that really what he's after? Christianity. And I know back there it's Judaism, but for us, in the fulfillment of Judaism, Christianity and Judaism was designed to be this also. Look back at Deuteronomy 6. You know, we often emphasize in the giving of the law, do this, don't do that, don't do that. There's a lot of that. You look at how much God emphasizes the inside. That's what he wanted all along, a religion that was exercised not merely on the outside, but from the inside out. You compare that to so many religions of the world, especially the pseudo-religions of this time. It was all about a song and a dance. It was a jig that you could do for the gods to pacify them. And doesn't it just treat them like they're just some kind of ignorant, detached entities? And to speak of the Lord in that way, they don't know the jig and the dance. They don't know the rituals. So you got to go through this, these outward things to appease something somewhere is what they have in mind. Therefore, he has sent lions among them, and indeed, they are killing them. And it's because they do not know the rituals of the God of the land. Then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, send there one of the priests whom you brought from there, and let him go and dwell there. And let him teach them the rituals of the God of the land. Well, that's a really fascinating idea. Well, the problem is you don't know the rituals of the God of that territory. And so you need to get one who's been carried away captive, send them back, and they can teach all about the God of that land and the things that he wants. Why is that a little bit laughable? Why were the Israelites carried off in the first place? They didn't listen. What priests had Jeroboam set up to officiate the religion of the land? Same people who didn't listen, Justin. And God is commanded to be who as the priest? What particular group? The Levites. And the true priests, the Levites, had defected from Israel many years back. Shortly after the division of the kingdom, when all this false religion is being instituted, and they go to the south, there are these priests who are completely ignorant of the God of the land, who've been carried away because they're completely ignorant of the God of the land. And then these people who have infiltrated, have been placed there by the king of Assyria, who are ignorant of the God of the land, have sent to them priests to teach them about the God of the land, but they're ignorant about the God of the land. In fact, that's why they were carried out. So, I mean, you really can't make this up and the humor that's involved. Now, we're going to put a pause on things right there because we're out of time. So how's this going to go when these ingenious priests who know nothing about God go back to teach the people about God? How's this going to work out? Justin suggests it gets really, really bad, really, really quickly. I think Jesus might have had something to say about this. This is a case of the blind leading the blind. That always works out, doesn't it? Recipe for success right there. What happens when the blind leads the blind? Both fall off the edge of the road. Doesn't work out great. Go ahead. That's such a good point, Emily. I hadn't thought about that. And that really goes to reinforce what it was I suggested. It offended me to hear the rituals of the God of the land instead of this heartfelt lifestyle of religion from the inside out. And so, yeah, you're right. They're trying to confine God just to this guy who likes the song and the dance as opposed to the guy who wants everything. And then with that statement, trying to confine him to this little geographical barrier that's been drawn up by people instead of the God of the universe, the God of the world beyond ours. Yeah, so good, Emily. Thank you. Okay, any other comments as we stop on that spot? So for next time, we're going to finish up this section. We're also going to begin to get into 2 Chronicles chapter 29. We'll actually spend several weeks on a terrific king. You don't find this very often in this stretch, especially late. And in Judah, Israel's gone. But in Judah, we're going to find a fantastic king for a lot of his reign anyway in Hezekiah. 2 Chronicles 29, if you would please read that as well as refresh yourself on the end of this section. 2 Chronicles 29 verse 3 is what we're going to memorize. 2 Chronicles 29:3. Okay, thanks.